So last year in Lent, I preached a series on models of the Atonement and how Jesus saves. And on the fifth Sunday in that Lent, I said the following. The story of our salvation is so rich and deep that it would be possible next Lent to preach this whole series again with the same headings and draw out different components of these same parts of the mosaic of redemption. So guess what? And believe it or not, a few people have specifically asked me to do this, but I'm not going to name names so you know who to blame. Now, because of the themes which are inherent in the Bible readings this season of Lent, I'll have to change the order of things from last year. So this first week actually marries up with the second Sunday in Lent from last year, and you can actually go onto YouTube or Facebook to check out what was said last year and see what is freshly brought out this time around as we explore the mosaic of redemption. So here we go. Jesus and Atonement, the Devil Strikes Back, REDUX, which explores the Christus Victor theory of atonement, which is about Jesus overcoming all that is evil, and particularly that personified entity in opposition to God, which is commonly called the devil or Satan. Now, in the cultural West, it's arguably the case that we are skeptical about anything to do with the devil or the demonic. Personally, I've got no experience, which gives me cause to give this area a priority, especially given that at the end of the day, Jesus wins anyway. That being said, there are a couple of people in this parish who have told me quite compelling experience they have had, which they identified as related to the demonic. And one priest I know in this diocese has had what we call exorcisms as part of his ministry. Indeed, I worked with him for a very short time, but in that space, there was, coincidentally perhaps, or perhaps not, a sudden rush of calls on the church asking about that form of ministry, almost like they were led to the church at that time because he had this, ministry on offer. But regardless of the objective reality of such things, what we can probably all relate to is the area of the inner spiritual battle between opposing forces, a bit like Jesus experienced in the wilderness. So the people of Israel, also called God's Son in Exodus, Deuteronomy and Hosea, had 40 years in the wilderness. And instead of passing the test put forth in being God's people, they put the Lord to the test instead. And it didn't go well for them. So Jesus, in a sense, relives the history and the test of his people, but succeeds. But it doesn't come easy. He is faced with temptations, and temptations that actually come under the guise of the good. Hunger is not a good thing. Relieving hunger is a good thing. But for Jesus to use his God-given power to serve his own interest in that way would compromise his mission, which is to be completely for the service of others. He's offered power and authority in the world, and that is something which properly belongs to him. But he's offered an easier path to it. But that would not be the path that the God he calls Father intended. So again, this would compromise his mission, which is oriented to the service of others. He's also tempted to show his divinely favoured status by putting himself in danger. But as said, that would be putting the Lord to the test. And no doubt it would be a pretty spectacular thing to see. It would give him some instant messianic cred. But his route to glory is to go first through rejection and suffering. Now, 2 out of those 3 things are solely related, actually, to getting God to do something. With the other one, about ruling over the nations, the only one in which the devil claims to have some sway. But even then we could ask, have all the kingdoms of the world been given to the devil? So part of the test could be calling that out as a lie and refusing to believe it. And that reminded me of the teaching of Irenaeus of Lyon, the great early church father, who said, "The devil's temptation is to offer what he cannot give." In other words, the temptation's end goal is to make a person turn away from the only source of life, who is God. So quite simply, I put it to you that part of Jesus' atonement and how Jesus saves us is to bring into sharper relief the mechanisms and temptations of evil. And by having our eyes better equipped to see them, we can reject them with God's help and strength. Jesus saves us by giving us his strength when we are tempted, and is ready to forgive and raise us up even if we fail. But I want to try and ground this for you in something that you can relate to in your own lives. And it goes back to what I said was mentioned in the gospel story, that the temptations to deviate from the path God calls us to doesn't just come in relation to what is obviously bad. The more dangerous temptations are those which relate in some way to the good. The most difficult choices can be between the good and the best. So to help illustrate that, I want to finish with a series of quotes from one of C.S. Lewis's best books titled The Screwtape Letters. Have you heard of the Screwtape Letters? A few have, that's good. The story is about the training of a junior devil named Wormwood by his uncle, a senior devil named Screwtape. And the training involves the junior devil putting a man, which he regards as his patient, through a series of temptations and tests, trying to draw him away from the one the devils call the enemy, we call God. But I found that a really helpful text which brings to light this dynamic of inner spiritual struggle and warfare. So I share just a few extracts with you. So here we go. Never forget, this is Screwtape talking, never forget that when we are dealing with any pleasure in its healthy and normal and satisfying form, we are, in a sense, on the enemy's ground. Enemy being God for the devil. I know we have won many a soul through pleasure. All the same, it is his invention, not ours. He made the pleasures. All our research so far has not enabled us to produce one. All we can do is to encourage the humans to take the pleasures which our enemy has produced, at times or in ways or in degrees, towards that which he has forbidden. Another one of my favourites. Your patient has become humble. Have you drawn his attention to the fact? All virtues are less formidable to us once the man is aware that he has them, but this is especially true of humility. And finally, with regards to God's faithfulness to our walking in the way of Christ, battling temptations and occasionally, or God forbid, often failing, he cannot tempt to virtue as we do to vice. I say again, God cannot tempt to virtue as we do to vice. He wants them to learn to walk and must therefore take away his hand. And if only the will to walk is really there, he is pleased even with their stumbles. He's pleased even with their stumbles. So may the Lord look with grace and kindness even on our stumbles as we follow him through the wilderness this season of Lent, with our eyes fixed on the glory and hope of resurrection through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.